I want to start by thanking AIR. I have asked the AIR team to do things that sometimes I maybe should feel a little bit embarrassed about, like on a Friday afternoon. Say, I need something for a conversation with folks in the White House, and I really need it by Sunday noontime. And I don't know how folks did that, but folks actually stepped up to the plate each and every time, and I have the utmost respect and admiration for the work, uh, the quality and the quantity of the work that the AIR team has done to to advance so many of the initiatives that have been facilitated by the release of the PIAC data. I also want to thank Peggy Carr and her team um, at NCES, which continues to produce such high quality reports and other data products drawn from this data set and many other relevant data sets. I also want to thank all the folks who have been presenters and panelists and moderators here. I understand that this morning was a very powerful morning, that the presentations were extremely strong and the discussions very, very substantive and really created a dialogue about the importance of some of the issues that the data are revealing. So thank you for that. So in the time that I have with you, and I wish I could stay for the entire event, but unfortunately I cannot do some prior commitments. But I want to do three things in the time that I have with you. I want to sort of look back, and the purpose of looking back is to sort of celebrate how much PIAC has actually done in terms of creating momentum in the research and evaluation community, but most certainly beyond the research and evaluation community, looking at the policy community, particularly at the national level. The second thing I'm going to do is sort of look around a little bit with you at some very, very exciting things that have happened in research related to skills, some of which are directly related to the use of the PIAC data and some of which are conceptually related. Third thing I'm going to do is I want to sort of look ahead with you, share the perspective from our office with you in terms of where we think we are headed with this work. And then finally, I'm going to end by asking you to do something, or asking you to not forget to do something as you continue doing this great work. So looking back, I think we were about to organize this great event, and then something like a shutdown happened. But anyway, so in October now, what, 2 years ago it is, right? The data were released, and then on November 19th, Secretary Duncan kicked off a national engagement process named Time for the U.S. to Reskill. It was a report that we had asked the OECD to produce that looked specifically at the issues of adults with low skills as per the proficiency levels under the adult survey. That then resulted in a number of regional engagement sessions where we brought together people who were active in various capacities in the world of adult learning, but also people who had an interest in or were affected by the fact that so many, an estimated 36 million adults, did not have the skills that would enable them to advance and put themselves on a path into the middle class. We had tech innovators at these sessions. We had business leaders who had explored solutions for skills challenges they were facing as they were trying to modernize their services or the manufacturing of their goods and so forth. So data release, engagement process, and then we were very fortunate in the subsequent January of 2014 that President Obama issued a memorandum on job-driven training. And he asked the Vice President to take a look at the extent to which everything we were doing in our education and training programs was actually responsive to the demand side, was job driven. And what that really reflected was the president's interest in that, you know, if we have these programs, we should make sure that people can leave these programs with skills that are actually helpful if they are trying to either find a job or find that next job. So we worked with the vice president's team and many of our colleagues at other agencies on a report that subsequently was released on the day of the signing of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, called Ready to Work. So why do I spend so much time talking about this? For those of you who have read that report, Ready to Work, you will see that the big policy case statement is based on the results of the PIAC results. In my career, I have not seen sort of too many instances where a secondary analysis of data available in this type of data set actually inform policy directions at such a high level. So we were, and we here is not just the Department of Education or OCTAE, but all folks in the education and workforce development system. We were really excited about the fact that these types of data enabled the development of a whole new way of thinking about how to solve the skills challenges in our country, with a particular focus on frontline workers. As I said, on the same day that report was released, the President signed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and in that act there are so many things that are new and very promising policy changes and programmatic innovations compared to the Workforce Investment Act. But one that I want to point to that I think has a conceptual connection with the PIAC findings, particularly the findings relative to there being so many low-skilled adults, is this commitment in that law, a policy commitment basically to serving individuals with the most significant barriers to employment or advancement. And the low-skilled adults, the immigrants who are trying to learn English at a later stage in life, adults who are learning how to read and write and do mathematics for the first time, are actually named in the list of these populations facing these significant barriers. So I think there is an enormous level of sort of conceptual concurrence, if I can use that phrase. Then in November last year, Secretary Perez established something called the Skills Work Group. And what it's a collaboration between 13 federal agencies, the National Economic Council, and the Office of Management and Budget, to really advance some of the ideas that were introduced in this Ready to Work report. OCTAE, our office, was asked by Secretary Perez to take the great career pathways work that we had done with our colleagues in the Department of Labor and Health and Human Services and extend that work now to include these 13 agencies and the National Economic Council and the Office of Management and Budget. So that's significant. And as recently, excuse me, as recently as just a couple of days ago, we are at a point that between these 13 agencies, we think it's time for another convening, because we believe we have been able to craft a multi-year, multi-agency strategy to fully support the notion of creating career pathways in every community in our country. At the same time, we had an opportunity to look seriously at this idea of upskilling America. So, and what is Upskill America about? It's about working with the demand side, and that includes both businesses and industry representatives, as well as labor unions and labor management initiatives, to really say what can we do to replicate or scale some of the very promising practices that leading employers and labor unions have actually put in place to take people who lack foundational skills and support them in a way that they do not only meet their own advancement and income needs, but also satisfy the needs of the employers that they work for. There were over 100 companies that had made significant commitments, and I think collectively they employ, I think, over 10 million low-skilled workers in our country. And then there were 30 labor management initiatives and national and international unions who made a commitment to looking into ways to expanding the programs that they currently have for their members and see if they can open them up to individuals in the community. So that was another sort of important development. Then I think it's almost a year ago, or maybe it is a year ago, I think I was in this room, because I remember getting lost getting here last year and this year. So, but the first conference was here last year, so that's another sort of significant milestone in looking back. And then there are two additional things that I wanted to mention that sort of wrap up this reflection-oriented part of my remarks. One is in February, our office, in conjunction with many of our partners, released this thing called Making Skills Everyone's Business. And that was a report that reflected the best ideas that came out of these national and regional engagement sessions that we had held, and presented this information in two ways. One was it articulated a number of strategies, overarching strategies, that really would allow our country, if it were to pursue these strategies, to address the issue that there are 36 million low-skilled adults and 24 million incumbent workers who have poor foundational skills. I won't go through all these strategies now. That's not the purpose of my talk. But we also included vignettes. And these vignettes really show that the strategies that people were talking about are actually real stuff. But they're just happening in pockets. Arnie calls them pockets of excellence, and what Making Skills Everyone's Business is trying to do is propose strategies that would allow these promising practices to actually take place at scale. If you have not had yet an opportunity to look at that call for action, if you will, then I encourage you to do so. You will see, if you do that, the whole action plan is based on a data foundation that draws directly on the PIAC data set. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Heidi and myself and others had the great pleasure of participating in the National College Transition Conference, and the organizers of that conference had chosen Making Skills Everyone's Business to be the theme for their entire conference, and we were so appreciative of that. And there we launched sort of what we think is the next phase of work around using all these recommendations and ideas that have come from an analysis of the PIAC data, and it's a series of ideation workshops. So we started it there, and we are going to look into a process for making these ideation workshops happen across the country. Don't have too many details yet in terms of timelines and how that will actually be rolled out, but that's what we want to do. And just looking at some of the ideas that came out of this first ideation workshop, I am just so encouraged that if we continue to present the problem statement with the data and articulate what needs to happen next, that folks out there in the community who are doing this work on the ground will generate ideas that no policymaker at the state or national level would even think of are possible solutions. So I'm concluding the looking back part. So now I'm going to talk a little bit, if I'm still doing okay on time, that is, talk a little bit about sort of looking around. There is a lot to notice here in the skills arena. that I briefly want to touch upon, and one is in the area of health. You know, a surprising pattern of increased mortality among white and middle-aged adults with low education was revealed this fall. And this finding has raised a lot of attention about education as a social determinant of health, both mental and physical health. And many of the commentators have suggested a root cause to be the hopelessness and despair of adults without skills, and the despair that they actually face when either the national or their local economies shift or collapse. This study, joined the recent Institute of Medicine report on the overall poor health and life expectancy of Americans compared to other developed nations, called U.S. Health in International Perspective: Shorter Lives and Poorer Health. This report surveyed a great deal of the literature on the social determinants of health, finding again and again the key role that not just education but also skills play in physical and mental health, but also in preventative care. So health, looking around, that was significant what happened there. When we look at the area of working with young adults, the Educational Testing Service, as many of you know, published a now widely popular study on young adult skills with jaw-dropping implications for the degree of workforce preparation of our young adults. The report was called America's Skills Challenge, Millennials and the Future, and was cited in so many newspapers, blogs, social media, and a number of journals and trade journals as well. So this report, I think, was really creating like a sobering backdrop to a national summit that was hosted just earlier this fall by the National Academy of Science on developing a STEM workforce strategy. And changing the equation gave the bad news about adults a hip twist, and sort of got attention with their infographic does not compute. I don't know if you've seen that, but if you haven't, that's a good one to Google quickly. Highlighting the gap between what millennials do with technology, what they need to do for job success, and what they think they need. So, and I did have an opportunity to read through that infographic and that report, and I found it a very, very interesting report. And because many of the findings were actually counterintuitive. I had this idea that there wouldn't be these types of challenges in the millennial generation, and I was quite surprised at the extent to which there are both skill issues and other issues in that younger generation. So I've looked at health, looked at the younger generation. Turning to the labor market, there's a host of economic and labor reports that I think have contextualized now the role of particular skills and constellations of skill sets. And that the work done by Burning Glass, I think, is extremely fascinating. They did an analysis of job postings, and we actually saw from their work, and this is looking at real job postings, right? They're not sort of analyzing some secondary data set or anything. They saw that basic mathematics is critically important if you're in the food service, hospitality, personal care fields, and writing was the third highest, what they call demand baseline skill, and that fluency with spreadsheet software is now a distinguishing skill if you want to get into these middle skill worker jobs. So those were interesting findings because they actually look at issues in real time and try to infer data on skill requirements that can and should inform both local, state, and national workforce policies. And then, the OECD's report this summer on the use of problem solving in technology-rich environments, did confirm that digital skills are really a gateway to advancement, and that there is a strong correlation with higher wages. You know, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is just mention the other areas where I've seen, or where we have seen, some major publications, and one is in the area of social cohesion, and a whole new emerging body of work around socioeconomic integration as a new way of thinking about solutions for issues such as occupational segregation and other significant challenges that are part of the issue of inequality in our country. And then I think sort of as we're looking around, you know, there was some very interesting work also in the area of digital inclusion. I most certainly felt that now that there is a development to do an X Prize, a big prize challenge around adult learning, that is a new thing for our field, but a very, very promising way of actually getting to breakthrough solutions that we historically have not pursued as a particular mechanism. And then many of you, I think, were aware of the Digital Promise design sessions that were, or ideation sessions that were held just recently. Here again, the purpose being to bring as many sort of technologists, they're called these days, you know, into the conversation and see what can be done, leveraging new technologies to get to solutions that our traditional ways of service delivery have not been able to get to. And for those of you who are teachers or former teachers, you know, getting beginning readers beyond that third grade level equivalent point is a really difficult thing to do. Once you get folks to sort of the intermediate level of basic education proficiency, folks seems to be hitting a wall constantly. We don't have good solutions for that yet. We know incidence of learning disabilities plays into this, but we have no clue how to actually act on that. But I think I think there are some incredible things happening in the technology space that we should pay closer attention to and incentivize. Just to sidetrack for just 1 second, you know, I had an opportunity to meet with one of these technologists a while ago, and what they were working on was a non-print technology-based interface to teach autistic children and adults who do not know how to read. And I had to say, like, okay, one more time. And you know, and they're making significant progress. So I think this whole idea of sort of bringing people who understand, you know, what the promise of technology is, together with people who understand what adult learning is about, and then make sure that when we do that, we have some good researchers and evaluators to be partners of this, I think is going to move our field to what I call breakthrough solutions for this skills thing. Okay, so now looking ahead, we are very eager to leverage the forthcoming national supplement data to further the conversation among federal agencies and stakeholders, and really to focus that conversation on even more on issues of equity, access, and completion of education and training programs. So we cannot wait, and I'm not kidding, to, you know, for the data from the prison study to come out, because we have been at a disadvantage for a little while now that we didn't have those data, and we are making, in the context of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, where we're trying to think of ways to support the new provisions around corrections and reentry education, but it would be so much more comfortable at the policymaker level if we actually had a solid sort of recent data set that we could draw on. So we're super excited about that happening. I think also the fact that we will have new data on older Americans is significant. You know, in this whole sort of media coverage of PIAC, sort of the idea that the older adults are not included sort of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. And I'm excited that we're going to have opportunities to draw attention to that. Also want to point out that the administration continues to sort of create opportunities to address this issue. And I'm about to date myself right now, but when I'm asking the following question, who remembers something called the National Workplace Literacy Partnership Program? If you could raise your hand. Okay, so maybe about 8% of the people in the room. So this was a program in the 80s and the 90s that was really about supporting frontline workers who had literacy and numeracy challenges so they could get ahead, right? Well, the administration just, we just launched this $100 million competition called Tech Hire. And under that competition, which is about preparing people for jobs in the technology field or jobs that are heavily technology dependent, there is an allowance for upskilling frontline workers. Well, if you just look at that amount of money, if people actually were to take advantage of that provision, that money would be more than 2 times the total appropriation that was available on an annual basis under the National Workplace Literacy Partnership Program, which was terminated by Congress in the mid-90s. So I said I would take you down sort of 3 paths. One was looking back, looking around, and looking ahead. I think I've done that, and I indicated I would end with an ask. I want us to collectively keep one of the bigger goals of research and evaluation in mind as we keep thinking about what is sort of the next research question or topic we could explore using the PIAC data. Because, we actually have a choice, right? When we think about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of possible studies that can be done with this data set, we actually make choices about what we want to look at. So, and my ask is, and I'm asking it, collectively, of myself too, is to move our work sort of from analyses that carefully document the problem or the experiences of various subpopulations and the consequences of having or lacking skills to a set of analyses and studies that have added value and can inform the development of new programmatic strategies and policies, right? That is a choice that we have, right? We can continue to sort of refine our understanding of how skills issues play out. In other words, we can continue to refine the problem statement, but I think based on my review of the data dictionary in PIAC, that there are studies that are waiting to be named that actually will use the data in ways that they can inform new programmatic strategies and policy interventions. So I have told myself I would do this each time I have this opportunity to make this type of choice, and I'm going to ask you to do that as well. And my main motivation for doing this is about the opportunity agenda, right? If we continue to define the problem and document the consequences of not having strong skills, that's good. It's always good to have a very strong case statement and a good return on investment case. That's always good, because nobody will listen if you don't have one. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is not have this information at our fingertips. What we're trying to do is actually make sure that we can do what the president has asked us to do. When he said in 2014 in the State of the Union, he said, opportunity is who we are. and he asked all of us, you know, to work on this, and he said, you know, and our task as this generation is to restore this opportunity. And I wanted to end with this because in my mind there is a clear connection between what the president was asking us to do and the work that you are doing using the PIAC data here.
Well, thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.